Justicia reclaman mis abuelos y abuelas, en mis venas lloran. ¿Qué pasará con la rumba de todos los días, la que zumba? Subiendo y bajando como la historia, llegamos con la memoria de Antillana.
I invite you to please welcome Kit Murphy McNally.
Although I don't know if I probably am well enough without it. Well, thank you. I'm really very pleased to be invited to be here, and very pleased that you guys are doing what you're doing here in Racine. I want to talk about what's going on, what has gone on, and what I think is going to be going on in criminal justice in Wisconsin. And because I know there was some interest in the Minnesota-Wisconsin, it's not looked at as a parallel, but it really is. I mean, it's amazing how alike we are. We should have all been one state. We had a lot more clout in this country. What built up the prison populations everywhere after the war on poverty that Lyndon Johnson started crashed and burned, Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs. And that was followed by a war on crime. And that was followed by a war on youthful predators. And if anything the media ever picked up was wrong and got, in the households and the common conversation everywhere, it was this business of youthful predators. Young men between the ages of 14 and 26 are the #1 leading risk of crime. It's just something that comes with being male. But they're not predators. Very few of these folks are predators. And what a scary word. The media they were guilty for picking up this language. They were guilty for furthering the war on drugs. It's snappy stuff to talk about on the radio. It works good in headlines. And it does such great damage to our neighbors and our sons and our daughters and fathers and mothers. And so these bad laws, irrational thinking, irresponsible reporting, and really snarky commentary from the opinion leaders did a lot to convince the country they were in great danger. Crime was just rampant, and drug-crazed people were going to threaten their very existence, when in fact the violent crime rate has really been very steady, and crime rate's been falling since the early 90s. You wouldn't know that from the media. It sounds like it's just all really taken off, but it's not. It's just the way people are able to tell the story, and they don't tell it true. Well, as our prison population expanded across the country, there were law enforcement dollars just literally pouring into states. In Milwaukee, this was very lucrative. We wound up with more police per capita than in any other city in the country. And you know what you have when we got more police? They're on the streets, and they're on the streets in very vulnerable communities. And when there's street drugs going on, it's street drugs they're going to find, and they're going to find the people with them, whether they're using or whether they're dealing. And they're going to go to jail. And then they're going to go to prison. And then they're going to fill up your prisons. It's that combined with really bad legislation. Any legislation that's got a name of a human being is terrible legislation. It means it was passed in an emotional time. It means it was not well thought through. And it means it's going to cause great harm in the end. An example of this is the three strikes law in California. The abduction and murder of Polly Claus was really what promoted that. And California subsequently has overfilled its prisons with low-level offenders who are in there for life. Consequently, after they had, bankrupted, nearly bankrupted the state, really destroyed a public education system, higher education system that was the envy of everyone in the country. They're now having to let people out of prison, and it's not this thoughtful, careful letting out. It's we've got to shut them down because we cannot afford to keep these prisons open. It's unconscionable. It never should be allowed to happen, but it happens every day. Every day there's some new case, and people go to the legislature and say, we need Polly's law, we need Sandy's law, we need Johnny's law. Bad law, really, really bad law. Well, states, in our state, what this all caused, of course, was prison building and prison expansion. It was very expensive. And Governor Thompson, after he had built the Supermax out in Boscobel that we did not need, we do not have a lot of these really, really uncontrollable, violent inmates in our prison system. And ironically, the few that we did have, we sent across the river to Stillwater, Minnesota, who had a control unit prison, and we rented a few beds, and they were fine. But a lot of money came into the state from the federal government in return for building a Supermax. So we built it and have spent most of the time since we built it figuring out how to use it. And there's really, the way to use it is to blow it up. But it was enough that Thompson, after that happened, said no more. Not going to build any more prisons. And he asked Walter Dickey, who's outstanding law professor at the University of Wisconsin, and who was for a while the Secretary of the Department of Corrections, to head up a task force to look at sentencing and corrections in Wisconsin. The task force came up with a great plan. It was really excellent. I know Walter well, and he put together this task force with conservatives and business leaders. And when he did it, I said, oh my God, why are you doing that? Those aren't the people that want to get people out. Those aren't the people that want to create a lot of alternatives in the community. And he says, that's exactly why I'm doing it. He says, we're going to go around this state. We're going to listen to people. We're going to hear the stories. We're going to hear from people directly what this imprisonment, what all the prison, the prison building has done to the people in this state, the families in this state. And I can guarantee you they're going to want to do something different when we're done. And they did. The plan they came up with was to create, well, it wasn't even as specific as creating regional facilities. It was letting each region decide what they would like to do with people who offend that weren't, terribly violent and dangerous. There would still be prisons to send those people off to, but very few of them. But in a region, you could decide what you wanted. Maybe you wanted a reporting center and not have anything that required people to be locked up, depending on what kind of problems you had and how you felt about dealing with these issues in your community. Or you could create a regional facility, and this he particularly was talking about as a maybe in the southeastern part of Wisconsin. You'd want a regional facility that was close to where people lived. They would be incarcerated for a short time in this facility and get training and education and treatment. But very quickly they would move out into the community and be connected with community programs and their family and get a lot of support from agents that were working in the community, not to watch them and not to be saying, oh, did you get home late last night? Or did you check into that place that you're not supposed to go? Or they wouldn't be doing that. They'd be doing positive things. How are you doing making a connection on a job? What are you looking for? What can I do to help you? Which he had even mapped out how much more economical it was going to be to pay 10 of these people to stand on a street corner and work with the people that had been arrested from that corner than it would be to send them to prison where the next 10 kids would be on the street corner doing the same thing. But by having someone in the community do positive things, you kept that street corner clear and helped the kids that were ready to stand into the middle of the mess. It was a really a great idea, and it was very well laid out in the report that the mayor of Milwaukee had not even read when he called a press conference the next morning after it was released. And he told the media, "I will absolutely have no bed and breakfast prisons in Milwaukee." Well, this is, magic words, fun stuff to do. Everybody ran off to talk about how the state wanted to put bed and breakfast prisons in Milwaukee. We're going to coddle these people and they'll just go in and out and have a nice place to sleep at night. There was no truth to what was reported about it. There couldn't have been, because he talked to the mayor and the mayor hadn't read it. But the whole reason this press conference occurred was political. Thompson was going to run for governor again, and the mayor and the attorney general were considering running. So to get the political edge, the mayor had this press conference. This was Mayor Norquist, not the current mayor. Just bad all the way through, to take such advantage of something that you don't even know about as a political tool, when something could have happened that really would have stopped prison expansion. We haven't built new prisons, but we have greatly expanded the ones we've got. When a private prison industry came into Wisconsin, they built a prison in red granite. The legislators claimed, "We didn't know they were doing that. We didn't hear anything about it. They didn't check with us first," because private prisons are illegal in Wisconsin. Illegal. We have to keep our prisoners, as long as they're in the state, we have to keep them in public prisons. But this private prison was built completely, and the state, to their credit, the legislature still said, no, we're not going to bring in private nobody private's going to run this prison. But yes, what did happen though, that we all paid for, was the building was built and there had to be a minimal staff there to manage it so that it didn't deteriorate. So for several years we paid people just to be in an empty prison. Well, of course, ultimately the state bought the prison and filled it up. But still, we have hung tight on not having private prisons in the state of Wisconsin. However, because we weren't building new prisons, and because the population was growing, we wound up sending a lot of our inmates out of state to Tennessee and Oklahoma, West Virginia, where they were in private prisons. Now, the Department of Corrections says we're monitoring, we're sending people out, we're checking on them, we're making sure things are all right. But they didn't get out there very often. And nobody liked it. And no one was happy we were doing this because we truly did not know what was going on. And the private prison industry is really sort of a scary monster. Community Corrections of America, which runs all the prisons in Tennessee, and we speculated on what happens if they go bankrupt and belly up suddenly. What's Tennessee going to do with all these prisons that they no longer have any management role in? But one of the things that CCA did in prison, their main prison, was every day on the gate to the prison they would post their stock standing. Does this say anything at all about what was most important to this corporation? It certainly wasn't the men and women behind the fence. I'm trying to think of a kind way to talk about the worst thing I think we've done that has, aside from rolling along with the war on drugs and locking up far too many people, especially far too many people of color, because they were easy to find and to prosecute and to imprison, was passing the worst truth in sentencing law in the nation. And it is absolutely the worst. We were the only state to pass a truth in sentencing law that said the individual had to serve 100% of their sentence. Most of them were 75, 85%. Ours was 100%, and it's bifurcated sentence, so part of it is served incarcerated and the other part on extended supervision. Extended supervision had to be at least 25% of the incarcerated portion, but it could be more. What the judges, well, they also thought, they added six new felonies, so it was very, much more clear who's going to get charged with a felony and go off to prison. But they, excuse me, I lost my track of thought on what they were doing. Six new felonies and the truth in sentencing and the bifurcated sentence. This was the horror that went totally out of my head. Extended supervision has been, instead of being 25% most commonly of the incarcerated sentence, it's been much longer. The feeling was when they reworked the sentencing guidelines, the judges would actually sentence people for what this 100% was going to be because they knew they would be there. Before that, people generally would serve about 50 to 60% of their sentence before they'd be eligible for parole unless they really were not at all compliant when they were imprisoned. And judges tend to give longer sentences knowing that they would be out probably halfway through the sentence. With truth in sentencing, they knew they wouldn't be out partway through, but they still gave longer sentences. So this has also compounded the situation of who we have in prison and how long we have them in prison. But the true horror of, there's two true horrors of extended supervision. One is you can violate on the last day of your extended supervision and go back to prison and have to serve the whole sentence over. The incarcerated sentence and the extended supervision. It is theoretically possible for someone with a very minor offense to wind up with a life sentence. And this is true because 70% of our prison admissions are violations of extended supervision. They're violations without new offenses. Now, when you're for years under supervision, and you've got somebody watching everything you do, and you've got 40 rules that you're expected to comply with, it's not that hard to start doing things that violate those rules. So it's not that hard to wind up back in prison, particularly if you can't find work because you have a criminal record, you don't have a family that's strong and structured and ready to bring you in and support you. You didn't get adequate treatment. To get treatment in the state prison system, you have to apply for it and get it before you can be released. And you have to do it the last 6 months of your prison sentence. And that means you have to start asking really early because not very many of the prisons have treatment. You have to get transferred from wherever you are to where the treatment program is. Nuts. It's just nuts. But while these things have been going on, most of them pretty terrible things, but none of them quite as bad as truth in sentencing, there have been some really good things trying to mitigate what happened, some things that haven't worked necessarily, but a lot of good effort went into them. Walter Dickey's commission was one, that task force that went on the shelf. But there's also a planning and policy committee, which is really a stellar committee of the Supreme Court. And alternatives to incarceration are one of the key things they look at. They've heard a lot of testimony, they've had some good plans, but really nothing concrete has come from that. Coming from the Supreme Court, it would have a lot of clout behind it. They really have the power to do something if they decide they want to push one of these initiatives. Governor Doyle's Commission on Reducing Racial Disparities in the Wisconsin Justice System had all the right people on it, had a great report, in a couple places. I don't know if anything of that report is happening in Wisconsin or in Racine, but there isn't anything happening in Milwaukee. Why would we need to reduce disparities in Milwaukee? I do think out along the western edge of the state, some of those, La Crosse and Eau Claire, are doing some things with recommendations from the commission. but it's certainly not getting the mileage it should have gotten. It dealt with really serious issues, had a lot of good people testifying, had an excellent report and recommendations, and there it sits on the shelf. Special legislative there was a legislative council special committee on justice reinvestment that the Center for State Courts supported in Wisconsin. Legislature met for about 6 months and got great data. The Pew Center for Courts was also involved in this, and for the first time there was data pulled out of the Department of Corrections that really gave a clear picture of what was going on. And that's where we found out that 70% of the people going into our prison system were violators of extended supervision and not having new offenses. The state had always maintained, oh, well, you know, that's a bad statistic because they've reoffended, but they hadn't. There were 5 pieces of legislation that came out of that commission, and it was bipartisan, some very, very vocal conservatives on it. Thank you. And Lena Taylor was the chair, and so no nonsense, you know, we're going to get this done. Everyone unanimously came together around these 5 recommendations, which would have really circumvented truth in sentencing and helped a lot of people get out of prison when they deserved to get out of prison. Got to the legislature, was passed by the legislature, got to Governor Doyle, and was vetoed. It was vetoed because the Secretary of the Department of Corrections said, we have an early release program, an earned release program, that's almost ready to launch. It's going to do all those things that you've got in that legislation, but it's going to do it better. Well, it was probably another 2 years before the earned release program even made it public. And when it did, DOC made a number of mistakes. They, first of all, called it early release. And right away the media grabbed on this. Early release, they're releasing all of these crazed killers to the street early. What are we going to do? We can't let this happen. As far as the inmates were concerned, they didn't just have an early release program, earned release program, they had 3. And the inmates had to find the right one the first time they applied, because if they applied and that wasn't one that applied to them, they couldn't apply to either of the other 2. It was so convoluted that the few people who did get out on earned release got out a few weeks or a few days before their sentence actually would have been up. And some got so caught up in the bureaucracy and the red tape, they actually got out after their sentence ended. Well, it didn't matter a whole lot because in less than 2 years the program died. And it died because of all the publicity about early release, and Wisconsin is letting prisoners out right and left, and we've got to stop this. And so the OC stopped it. I think that's really what I've gone through. Is not everything that's gone wrong. There's been a whole lot of things that have gone wrong. There have been even more attempts to do things right. But a lot of it has been studies and commissions and recommendations. And if we have learned nothing, it's that people don't read these reports, they don't act on these reports, and these reports don't sway the policymakers. What does is people. It's you and I, it's stories. You got to have the data, and there's plenty of people putting data together. There's plenty of data already out there. But a representative who has a real live person sitting in front of him making a case reacts much more to the issue than all of the paper that you could pile on him in a year. And that's where Wisdom has been doing such a fantastic job. Wisdom and Micah from Milwaukee, and is it Rachel?
Racine Interfaith Coalition from Racine.
Okay, yeah. So you guys, most of you probably know about the power of all of that, and the 11 by 15 initiative is, by 15 we're not going to have the prison down to half. But what we do have is gold. It's legislators knowing constituents having a real face in their minds and a real person and persons when they start looking at the data. And I believe, I just really do believe this is one of the really bright things coming up for our justice system, that we can make a change and it'll be people making a change. Great. So that's one of the good things. One of the other good things is actually something happening in Milwaukee, and it's great that Milwaukee is kind of a catalyst for good things, because usually we're not. Usually we're the example of this is the worst of it. But back in 2009, we created a Community Justice Council and intentionally called it Community Justice, not Criminal Justice, not Criminal Justice Coordinating, just Community Justice Council. I was one of the people involved in organizing it, and we organized it really to pull all of the government and the justice leaders together to build a collaborative view of where we needed to go with the justice system in Milwaukee, because we all understood we were feeding this prison system, we were destroying families, we were not providing the kind of services and treatment and support that people needed that were caught up in the system. And the Community Justice Council was, spent about his first year and a half organizing. But then what has made the difference and what has reached out to the state, and which I think is going to make a difference for all of us, including Racine and every other county in the state, is a National Institute of Corrections initiative to put their people into areas to provide technical assistance on creating a system that's based on the evidence of what works. So it's everybody likes analytics now. Well, this is analytical. It really requires collecting a lot of data with every single thing you do. But then you get a scorecard where you can measure what's working. And if you have police doing car stops and they wind up taking 5 people in because they found marijuana in the car, how effective is this? What did it cost? What did it cost to process these people? Who were these people? What was the end result of it? You measure all of this so that what's good you expand, what's not working you fix or you get rid of. And it's been the first time that I have seen our political leaders in Milwaukee and our judges come together and say things like, we've been making bad decisions on who we lock up. When we have a chance to let somebody out into the community or lock them up, we tend to lock them up because we feel, well, the community's safer. And now we know, no, being locked up when you're a low-level offender, that makes you more likely to offend when you get out. It's great. It's just great to hear judges say this, because you know it's going to have an effect on what they do in the courtroom. But it's just as great to hear a mayor or a police chief say it, because that's going to involve, 1, what the mayor says publicly, and 2, what the police chief does on the street. And it's happening, and they're all together, and they're making plans in a lot of different areas where we're making changes in Wisconsin. We're one of 7 jurisdictions around the nation who got this grant to make changes. I will tell you that it was a grant we decided 2 weeks before the deadline to apply for. And everyone who's in our executive committee, except for 2 of us, said, no, we can't do this. We've only got 2 weeks. And the district attorney and I said, we have to do it. It's the reason we created this council. We've got to do it. We all wrote answers to the questions, and one of the court administrator put it all together. We got selected as one of 7, and Eau Claire as one of 7. What this has done is put the focus of the National Institute of Corrections on Wisconsin. They provide outstanding technical assistance. They know what works. They're on top of the latest, what's going on, what does the data show, what's making a difference, what empties out prisons, what are the best programs. And just this week, there was a summit that they supported with the National Institute of Justice in Madison that brought together the other jurisdictions around the country to sit here in Wisconsin, where we got to star with what we're doing, but also to learn what the other jurisdictions are doing. The Community Justice Councils are now spreading. I don't know if you have one in Racine yet, but they are spreading 2 counties all around the state, and we now have a statewide council. It remains to be seen if the legislature is going to listen to that council. but there's a lot of power on that council. These are the kinds of things that make a difference. That kind of thing happening collaboratively from government and the people, and what's going on with Wisdom and Micah and all of the other faith-based programs that have come together that can get the message to people in a way that they listen, and that can tone down the rhetoric that comes from the radio, it comes from talk radio, it comes from the media. It's wrong. And we've got all the data to prove that it's wrong. We've got the emotion to tell the stories. And this makes me believe that we're going to change things in Wisconsin. And it won't be too long before we're down in that last state. We're even going to bump Maine out. We're going to be the 50th state in who we incarcerate, and we're going to have great community programs going on in this state. And we're going to feel very proud about what we've done, and we're going to have done it because people like you are out there making a difference. It's the people who sit back and don't do anything but complain when they don't have the information that have been driving the bus so far. And they're going to have to get off really quickly. Now, I would like just real quick to tell you one more story that has to do with why this is also important, and it's another, the people. And you know it, I know you all know it, and I know it, but we lose sight of the people. And this one is a woman who came to the Benedict Center who was 59 years old, and she'd been in prison, and she got arrested again, and the judge decided he would send her to the Benedict Center instead of sending her back to prison. And she came to us for drug treatment. When she got involved in the drug treatment and said, you know, I never got my GED. I want to be part of education. You know, my kids have kids. It's too late for my kids, but I want to take the parenting class because I want to know how to take care of my grandkids, and I want to teach my kids how they should be doing it. She took every single program we had at the Benedict Center. And so I asked her when we were having an event one day, I said, would you mind speaking to tell people about your experience? And she said, sure, and she wrote for me what she was going to say, and it was all, you know, it's all the great stuff that the women always said, oh, the Benedict Center, if it weren't for the Benedict Center, I don't know what I would have done, and you're such great people, and, you know, naming us for all the fine things we've done. And I said, well, you know, are you comfortable telling your story? This is great that you feel this way about us, but is there something you can tell people that's really going to get them in the heart? You know, help them understand what you've been through in your life. Oh, yeah, I can do that. She went off and she read this story. And she was telling me, she brought it to me, but then she was telling me her story. And she said, you know, when I was born, my mom was raped, and I was the result of that rape, and my mom didn't want me. She already had another kid. And so she gave me to her sister. Her sister didn't want me either, but she kept me. But she really never liked me, and so she'd tie me to the bed, and she'd beat me. And she beat me all the time because I went to bed, because I was scared. And so she made me sleep on the floor. And she says, well, I fixed her. I wet the floor, and so the ceiling fell down underneath me. You know, this was the kind of thing, she says, I had to do to get back, because I had no power. But I had a really good friend when I was at school. And I was in Lincoln Hill School in Milwaukee. I was 13 years old, and my friend and I, we both got raped. And we both got pregnant. She had a lot of support, and people rallied around her and helped her. I had nobody. My aunt locked me out of the house, and she said, you know, you slut, you're never coming home here again. So I was on the streets, and I met this guy, and he said, you know, I know where you can make some money. You can dance. So she spent a lot of time dancing in these clubs, and of course, that turned into prostituting as well as dancing in the clubs. And then one of her dates, who was trying to be, you know, her friend, turned her onto drugs. And she'd never used drugs before, but she started using cocaine. And she says, you know, from there, my life just completely fell apart. She said, I had never felt like I was worth anything ever. When I got pregnant, I had to give away my child. You know, it was the one person on earth I thought might love me, and I couldn't have my child. I just felt like absolutely nothing. But you know, I found the Benedict Center, and the Benedict Center gave me hope, and it gave me promise, and it made me believe in myself. And I really, really wish that I could get a hold of my best friend and tell her that now I'm somebody too. I know I'm somebody, and she was. She'd gone on to MATC, she got training, she got a skilled job as a result of it. And I said, well, can we get you in touch with your friend? Let's see if we can get you guys together. And she says, oh, that's not going to happen. I said, well, who's your friend? She said, Oprah Winfrey. So if any of you have an in with Oprah, I am still trying to figure out a way to get get a message from Carolyn to Oprah, because I feel sure Oprah would want to connect with her. And Carolyn's story is the kind of story that Oprah loves to tell. And it's a very personal story that she's directly involved in. But so far, I haven't found a way through Oprah's massive protective base. So I talked longer than I intended to. I'm trying to use notes so that I would go much more fast. But if there's things that there's so much in all of this that if you have comments or thoughts or ideas about how some things could change or anything specific, I didn't mention a whole lot of things that are wrong. Anything that to you is something that's really a major wrong that needs to be righted, I'd really like to
We got a
hear
microphone
your
here.
thoughts.
Anybody wants to make a comment or ask a
I was
question?
going to ask you, how can you take on that initiative that you've been talking about and Milwaukee's doing such a great job on?
I'm sorry.
How do we here at Racine take on that initiative that Milwaukee is doing, and
The Justice Council
yeah, the
Collaborative.
community exactly. As a community, how do we do that in Racine? I'm sure there's enough people here. Oh, good.
You have the answer.
At our meeting on Friday, February 14th, Jennifer Bias, who was at this conference in Madison these past Tuesday and Wednesday, will be making a report and talking about this very thing. We will also be hearing from one of the women that works as a lawyer for the Public Defender's Office, talking about something that's really exciting about the JDAI, the Juvenile Diversion and Alternative Initiative, which is trying to deal with the very issue of racial disparities, particularly as regarding juveniles. And they're doing some really exciting things. So we're going to be hearing about those two things at our next meeting. 9:30, Office of the Public Defender.
I think it's on the board outside as I drove out. Jennifer, is that the one that's on the It's not? That's another Jennifer?
That's
Okay,
perfect.
so I will take notes on that after this and get that information. It's always nice to have these talks and conversation, but I think what happens in the process is they fall off.
Yeah.
And if we could do collaboration, I think is critical, because I'm sure many people here are involved in different organizations. That's why we're here. So if we could collaborate together and make sure that we're all here for that particular meeting, then there's strength in numbers, and then we can take on what our next action should be, so that we can facilitate what you're doing in Milwaukee. We're seeing, obviously, we have some critical issues here that we need to take into action.
And that's, the beauty of this network around the state is your issues may be different from Eau Claire's, from Superior's, and
Well, I
definitely
think that's
from...
what's happened is within the state of Wisconsin, we've taken on state issues.
Yeah.
We need to act.
Ken, we need to act as a community.
Yeah.
And when we act as a community, we take on our own issues. Not to say that those aren't the issues of other communities, but we take on our own issues, and then we can actually act on those issues, and so that the process gets from the beginning to the middle to the end. So we have an objective, and we have a goal, and then we complete our goal as a community. It's nice to have these state meetings and conferences and platitudes, but they really don't drive anything home. We don't see the action happening here, right? And we deserve it. We really work hard. There's numerous organizations that work very, very, very hard. Nonprofits, in fact, we're starting a new one in Racine. So I think if we actually collaborate together, strengths in numbers, Ken works diligently on so many things, and he invited me here tonight. I wouldn't have known about this. So that's how it works. If we all network together and collaborate together, and I will definitely be here for February the 14th. I won't forget that day. That's Valentine's Day.
And if you have a Justice Council here, you're part of a network where something that you're looking to do may have been done in way some distant part of the state. And we picked up some things from Eau Claire and Milwaukee.
We have all of the
Yeah.
information together.
And then we all have a lot more clout with Madison too.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
I heard a lot about helping prevent people going back into prison and things in the community, and also a lot of issues after someone has been sentenced. I was just wondering if there's anything going on, any organizations, anybody pushing the state level about reforming certain things like mandatory minimum sentences, as well as decriminalizing certain things that are considered crimes now that may have in years past only brought a civil offense, a fine, maybe a loss of a license in front of a board, whatever it may be, some type of program, and yet I was just wondering about that.
Back over to Betty.
It's like you're a wealth of activism here.
Yes. Judges around the state have been meeting for a while. Judge Patak, who belongs to this church, and who is the judge for drug court. By the way, does anybody, raise your hand, does Racine have drug court here in Racine? Yes. What does it do? Okay, that's one of the issues that's facing us right now, is most people have no idea that we have a drug court or what in the hell it does. Excuse me. But Judge Patak, who is right now the judge for the drug court, has been meeting with some other judges around the state, and they recently have made some very interesting proposals. Jennifer Bias knows all about them.
There are actually, there's a number of pieces of legislation too that various groups are trying to get through. That's part of it. Putting 17-year-olds back in the juvenile system, that's something that's actually gaining a little leverage in the legislature. Talk to your legislator and tell him or her, put those folks back. The reason that counties don't want to, or the reason counties don't want to support it is because it's going to cost them directly to put them back, but my God, they've got to do it. But there's also legislation that people are working on to ban the box, the little, you got to check you got a criminal record, when really everybody is not supposed to be looking to see if you got a criminal record. There's some working on CCAP and taking that off the public, leaving the information public, because it really does, it is a public record, but not having it on the internet, so that every employer and every landlord can go and look you up and find out, oh, you got a criminal record. No, I'm sorry, I don't think you're quite right for this job, because this is happening constantly, and really they're not supposed to be, I mean, it's supposed to be illegal to do that unless the job is directly related to what the offense is. We got a lot of things to get off the books in this state.
Well, in response to that, for instance, I'm a landlord. And I need that.
But you can still get it. I mean, if you need it, and some landlords do, I know, just by nature of you know, where you're working and who you're working with, but it would still be accessible. It just wouldn't be something that everybody could pull up on.
Well, I mean, I want to make sure that they pay their rent, and if they have a lot of, you know, where they've been, I can't think of the word, they're not paying their electric bills or their rents and stuff like that, or been evicted.
Yeah.
That's basically it. But were you going to say something?
Well, I just, Yeah, and as you know, as a landlord, there are some regulations about, you know, when somebody, even though they've been incarcerated, they're still supposed to be offered to rent, as long as they don't have real problems like that. But it gets ignored. In Milwaukee, it's a real problem.
My question, well, I don't even know if it's a question. I was listening half asleep to public radio this afternoon, and there was somebody on there, a woman from out west somewhere, who was talking about, and I know with that woman that was in your center that you helped her out when she got her GED and so forth, and she didn't know where to go when she got out immediately out. She was talking about people walk out, they get arrested in hot weather, and they get released in cold weather. There's nobody there to give them a coat or something, you know, substantial to wear, and they, so I just don't know. It made me feel real, you know, like, gosh, I want to go and stand at the gate and bring them a coat or something.
That's been a big problem in Milwaukee. Milwaukee releases at midnight. And we haven't even had the public defender as an ally, because the public defender doesn't want somebody to have to stay in longer than, you know, if they're free to go, they should be free to go. And of course, if you tell somebody, you know, you can leave, they want to leave. But that was a huge problem with the women, because they were picked up walking the streets, and they put them out at midnight in the same clothes. They don't have a ride home. They're walking home, and they get picked up by the police again. Yeah, it's just craziness. But it's also the security detention facility, to their credit. If somebody doesn't have, now this is not to their credit, if somebody doesn't have clothes, they'll send them out in their prison uniforms. You know, is that going to get you picked up? But they do solicit actively clothing and winter coats for people who came in when it was warm.
Okay, this is a great conversation. I hate to cut it off, but it's getting late. We need to get going home. So, Sister Alice, if
There's
you...
had her hand up a long time.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, one more. Last one. Okay.
Sorry, trying to get out of your way.
I guess I'd like to find out, what do you feel? Here in Racine, we've been experiencing a lot of the immigration, not just in our jail system, but also in the prison system, and how they rank and file our immigrants, and how they're treating them unjustly, we'll just say it that way. And even the methods they're arresting people. A lot of racial profiling here in Racine. In fact, you mentioned it a little bit, that you want to do things locally. Well, that's how we attack this situation. Sorry, that's how we attack this situation here in Racine. We just did it locally, but it's actually happening all over Wisconsin on how they're taking racial profiling. The sheriff departments throughout Wisconsin are targeting the Mexican populations, specifically for traffic violations, because most of the undocumented by now have expired driver's license. This is the final phase, the final years for anybody to have a license, since the state ruled that the undocumented can no longer have a driver's license. But because that happened, we, a coalition of people, have gone into the jails, and it's atrocious here in Racine. It's terrible. Under a new sheriff, and RCI is no better. How do we deal with that situation above everything else that is already, you're having problems with already? Because the immigrant is a criminal that society's saying, we don't want them here.
That's some of that I didn't know was going on. We've had problems. Our sheriff was sorting through everybody coming in and calling ICE right away. And
That's what they're doing here.
and there's a bounty. I mean, they're getting money for doing that. So supposedly he's been stopped in Milwaukee from doing it. I don't I doubt our sheriff has stopped doing anything that would be the good thing to do. And I don't know the answer to that. Immigration, it really should not be an issue. None of this should be the issues it is. And I think, you know, if you've got a group and you've got a coalition, I know that's the coalition in Milwaukee just hammers at this stuff all the time. But I don't know the answer to how you can stop it. I wish I did.
Okay.
I try to get to Waukesha today too. I try to send people to talk to the president, who gave an executive order to bring immigration full force to Wisconsin, because it's full force. They try to go to the court, you know, they try to do the process of paying their tickets or their fines at the courthouse, and immigration is there to deport them. We've just been very lucky that we have people now sitting at the courthouse, even at the child, all the different ones, family court or traffic court, to pay attention if anybody gets deported.
I will actually, I'll talk to our Community Justice Council about that. And I assume if it's going on here, it's going on big time in Milwaukee too. And if they could do something, maybe they can tie in, or we can tie in with what's going on down here, and at least get it to the state council and see if it gets a little bit more leverage with people who care. Give me your contact information, Maureen.
Betty, when did you say that it was the 14th of February? There's
9:30, Office of Public Defender. Let me know if you're coming. There's limited space, but maybe we can get a bigger space if enough people are coming. We haven't taken on that issue, but the sheriff of Milwaukee had a commentary in our local paper about 2 weeks ago, poo-pooing this whole idea of evidence-based stuff.
Yeah,
It's a bunch of hooey. It's
He's very busy.
So anyway,
blogging.
but our local sheriff went on, you know, when the state came down and said that in order to stop racial profiling, the legislature said they had to fill out certain forms. Our local sheriff said that's going to take too much time, so illegally he stopped that. I mean, but and Weingard was the person, when he was our senator, that stopped the early release program. He was the one that helped co-sponsor the bill that actually killed that. Yeah.
But it's like we have to continuously pay attention to who we're voting for.
However, I want to say that because of Racine Interfaith Coalition and what they did, our new police chief is very much aware. He has appeared with our task force a couple of times, and he has promised a couple of things that he is doing. So, yeah.
Sister Alice, would you like to close the meeting here this evening?
Yes, sure. First of all, I gotta say this.
And come back again when we have more, please.
First of all, for part of the Racine,
What happened to my voice?
the Racine Interfaith Coalition and the Racine Coalition for Peace and Justice, we are very proud that you came to speak with us and to get us all enthusiastic about helping people in jail. And so from the Racine Group and Wisdom, we have this. That was your speaker today. And from us, you have this cup.
Oh, thank you very much.
And thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Reclaman mis abuelos y abuelas, en mis venas lloran. ¿Qué pasará con la rumba de todos los días, la que zumba, subiendo y bajando como la historia? Llegamos con la memoria de Antillana, la brisa de resistencia, la confederacia de los de Quimbamba.